Hi, everyone. Many thanks for joining us today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is John Ayers. I'm the founder of a recruitment business called Harvey. We are a specialist recruiter in the SaaS space, working with early stage and scale up businesses on senior sales and commercial opportunities. I'm delighted today to be joined by Wayne Barker, highly experienced sales director and performance coach. Wayne's going to do a brief intro of himself, but he's going to be talking to us today about sales forecasting. Hi, Wayne.
Morning, John. Thank you for that. Thank you for the intro. Morning, everybody. Yes, as John said, I have a background in various senior sales roles, and more recently have been running a portfolio of sales acceleration projects, typically with earlier stage growing businesses that have proven that they've solved a valuable customer problem and now want to scale. So this morning, we wanted to talk specifically about how the senior leadership team, and specifically the CEO, should go about challenging the sales forecast. Now, I should be clear here that we're talking about the sales bookings forecast. But in a range of topics that we intend to address in the weeks and months ahead, we started with sales forecasting because we think it's a very important topic. We think that sales forecasting informs the most effective use of scarce resource and directly impacts the timing, the pace, the focus of investment, or maybe cost management decisions. And as such, is a critical topic that is easily overlooked, where you have so much to do and everybody is time poor. So with that in mind, I've created a small number of charts, you'll be reassured to know, half a dozen charts to lead us through the subject of sales forecasting. So when I was thinking about the topic, I think the place to start is identifying the common forecast methods. There are many methods out there, and in the world we live today, you could find 100 views on which one is the best. But here are 4 common methods to help frame the conversation. In a very early stage business, we might be comfortable with an instinctive approach, not least if the CEO is the lead salesperson, where we might have tame customers. We may take the view that it's quite predictable. We don't need systems. We don't need methodology. Fair enough. I think we will soon outgrow that. And then we might start to use either a roll-up method, where we will take the views of salespeople, sales management, the CEO. We might take that view and aggregate a view of the forecast. Or we might use our CRM, possibly out of the box, hopefully not, and apply a weighting to the sales process stages that will give us a view that may have merit, particularly in a business where there is a scale of opportunity, uniformity of customer, or perhaps a singular view of what the proposition is that you're trying to sell. You might then be able to use the weighting. My preferred method is the segmented model, where we would take a view of the pipeline and apply a risk factor. It might be systematic, or it might be opinion-based, but nonetheless, you would break the pipeline out into a min, a prob, and a max, and you would construct a view of the forecast. In more mature businesses, you might lead to a system-based approach. That, of course, would be very dependent on the quality of the data that is available to you. But particularly in a SaaS business, that might work well. Another factor that we would need to take on board as a senior leadership team when we are reading the forecast are the common forecasting behaviors. These might apply to salespeople. They might also apply to sales management. Maybe they apply to us as members of the exec. I should say none of these are intrinsically good or bad. They are behavioral traits, storytelling preferences, and they come alive when we're talking about a forecast because the forecast has that essence of a commitment. We're telling somebody what we think the payoff of this particular story is, good, bad, or indifferent. From a CEO's point of view, it becomes about the conversations you need to have about the forecast once you understand that these are the behaviors that created the forecast. So if we've hired a team of spacemen, that ought to influence how we drill into what's being presented. We don't want the CEO managing the individuals. We don't want to over-engineer personality profiling. But what we do want to do is have that understanding. This is the environment we've created. These are the filters I'm going to use in order that I can increase the trust I have in what I'm being told. So we don't want the CEO scrubbing the forecast. But what we do want the CEO to be doing is challenging the forecast. And I'm going to suggest that there are two pillars we might use to do that. Data, I think, is very important. So we're either in a position where we need to create the environment where from a very early stage, we are curating clean data. If we are more advanced, we might need to cleanse the data we've got. And once we become mature, we need to be mandating robust management of data. And the reason is to inform where the guide rails might be through which we can challenge the forecast that's being presented. The data itself is unlikely to tell us the answer, but it will give us the optics, maybe in the form of a dashboard, through which we can take a view on what the future might look like. So a bit like share prices, perhaps, or forecasting the weather. What happened before doesn't tell us what's going to happen next, but it does give us the framework through which we can host conversations to get to a trusted answer. The second pillar is dependencies. So based on what we know of our business and our experience, our customer base, competitive environment, where do we think the dependencies live? How can we isolate assumptions we might have made? And therefore, I guess it would be unfair to say eliminate, but at least identify and then mitigate where we have hope or guesswork informing the forecast. Once that forecast lands on the CEO's desk, it really should be crisp. It really should be sanitized and sober. So how then do we spot the anomalies? We certainly don't want the salesperson's narrative to go unchallenged. As we saw previously, there are different approaches that a salesperson will take to putting in a forecast. We don't want that to set the agenda, because then the CEO is in the position of doing the heavy lifting of scrubbing the forecast. That's not a good place to be. We need to give ourselves the opportunity to spot the anomalies, spot the assumptions, and drive to a good outcome. If we don't want the CEO scrubbing the forecast, that leads to the question of what do we want the CEO to do? How does the CEO inspect the expected? So there are a couple of views on this. The first is that the CEO shouldn't have any day-to-day interest in the sales process, but the CEO should be making sure that commercial expectations are clearly communicated from the top across the entire business and give weight to the adoption and maintenance of the right tools, structures, processes, leading to a culture that supports accurate forecasting. So sales process, I think, is a key consideration. Are we making it easy for everybody to do their jobs? Not just sales. There are many links in the chain that lead us from an individual opportunity to a happy, long-term, returning, growing customer. So the definition of those terms, the quality of qualification, the decisions we make to produce and maintain clean data, they need to be mandated from the top. Similarly, the environment that we create. So a wide and often intangible subject, but I would offer that the environment from a sales point of view needs to be characterized by a focus on skills development, not target pressure, seeing everybody very much invested in a clear approach to a sales methodology, and a common focus on clear KPIs. These things don't need to be deep or over-engineered. They need to exist. They need to be clear. They need to be reinforced. Similarly with behaviors, I think everybody will put their hand up and say that they inspect the forecast. But in a lot of businesses that I've been involved with, that can very quickly become routine. Same questions, often to the same people, all too often about the same deals. So the ability to create a rhythm with a bit of humanity rather than simply a routine by rote, is important. I think we should be comfortable challenging dependencies. Again, in these businesses, everybody is going to be time poor. Everybody will feel the challenge. So how do we detach ourselves from doing what we always did? Relying on the same people or the same accounts? How do we create an environment where we can have honesty in the forecast, openly debate and challenge that forecast, so that we don't simply end up defaulting to what we did last time? These topics are topics that the CEO should be driving through the leadership team from the outset, not unpicking if we don't like what we see in the forecast or if sales performance isn't where we need it to be. This is how we create the environment that allows us to manage the guide rails we want in place. The end result will be that the forecast, we always want to inspect the forecast, but this view will create an environment where there is a greater chance that that will be a dynamic, informed, vibrant, action-oriented discussion. To some degree. There is nothing binary in creating that environment, but as the CEO, this is what you should make yourself accountable for. If I was to boil this down, I would have 4 headings in my CEO daybook, in no particular order. Ensuring sales process clarity. Why would I have that in the CEO daybook? Because it assumes an appropriate investment in the right tool. It assumes quality resource of the right level with the right mandate to run a sales process. It assumes that the CEO has clearly defined who are the stakeholders in that process. These things do not happen organically. It requires clear decision-making, honesty about what's possible, and decisions to be made. Similarly, making the forecast a visible priority in order that forecast accuracy is the agenda should sit with the CEO. How do we do that? Well, I rarely see forecast accuracy as a bullet on a job spec. That's a bit odd to me. It seems to me that is a clear skill requirement for a top performing salesperson. I rarely see it as part of the review process for sales and sales leadership. Why would that be? And although it's not easy, we will typically not make time to review forecast accuracy. We might do it from an opinion or an experience point of view, but I think we should be tracking what people said, what they did, in order that we can have a discussion about where are the coaching opportunities. Is there anything structural that means that we're struggling to deliver an accurate forecast? If we don't get our heads around these topics at source, then we end up in a world where the CEO is personally trying to curate a forecast, usually when they're heading into a board meeting. That's a world we don't want to live in. We want it to be environmental, we want it to be systematic, and we want it to be understood company-wide who is accountable for what. Along those lines, I would also set out to make sure that the method we want to employ is coached. Now, I'm not suggesting that we need to coach people in how to deliver a forecast. I'm assuming that we're hiring good people, they're good salespeople. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we in company X want to produce forecast accuracy in this way. Therefore, this is what we're going to do. These are the skills we need to be able to do that. And we're going to make sure that there are no air gaps in that process. So expectations need to be set. They need to be coached. The CEO needs to set that agenda and then decide how that is going to be employed. Again, I'm not saying the CEO does the coaching. I'm saying the CEO needs to set that agenda and then inspect that it is being followed through. And then I'm going to point again to the data. This isn't easy. There are very few salespeople who would put their hand up and say they love using their CRM. They love creating that data bank that allows a data-driven view of a forecast. However, if we do create that, there are multiple benefits. And I think it is the CEO's mission to decide what is the data that is needed, what weight do I want to put on that data, and therefore, what am I going to not only mandate, but invest in making sure I get this? There are multiple views on the data that could be created. Some of it, particularly in a SaaS business, might well be systematic already in the nature of how a SaaS sale will progress. Connecting that to sales performance, connecting that to how to produce a sober view of the forecast that you can trust needs to be mandated. It needs to start from the beginning, and it needs to evolve as the business grows. So if we create this environment led by the CEO, I think we have the most important bases covered. We're addressing behaviors, skills, process. We're creating an environment where we will learn faster and ultimately give ourselves the chance of more accurate forecasting becoming systemic rather than the result of either individual brilliance in the sales team or a hands-on scrub from the CEO. And John, I'm very aware that there are many, many topics we could cover under the heading of inspecting the sales forecast. We could probably do 2 days on this. But those are the pillars that I think are the most important ones. And when I think about my own lessons learned, good and bad, from the projects that I've run over a number of years, that's how I would summarize the topic of inspecting the expected.
Thanks very much for that, Wayne. That was really informative. Got a couple of questions in the chat, if you don't mind. First one is from Mark. He would like to know, how do you manage ownership of the forecast when you've made your first sales hire?
Okay, good question. So if I understand the question, this is an environment perhaps where the sales have been founder-led, and now we're bringing somebody in who's going to carry a quota. They are now going to take on sales. If I've understood that properly, that's a great question, because that moment in the growth of a business is absolutely critical, both in terms of structures, in terms of methods, in terms of, let's say, relationships. So I think there's a couple of ways that I'd think about this. The first would be the criticality of the decision about who you're hiring. If you are hiring somebody to come in and be that salesperson working into the CEO, founder, leader, CEO, then I think the question at that point is, how does the CEO become a sales manager rather than the salesperson? In which case, the salesperson is going to produce a forecast, and the CEO will still be inspecting that forecast, but it's a different dynamic. So there's no separation. There's a change in role for the CEO. New skills, something I've coached in a lot, can be great fun, is not as easy as you would think. The second path is hiring somebody who is going to take on a sales leadership role, probably with the intention of building a team behind them. That can be a different challenge. So here we need to think about accountability. And I think that we should be prepared for an open discussion about who is literally owning that, whose number is final, what forum is that forecast going to be used in. So is that head of sales going to sit in the board meeting, or is that very much still the ownership of the CEO? And I think we should establish expectations. So for the new hire, it should be clear. If I'm the CEO finder, I want you to know I am naturally still going to inspect the forecast and the pipeline. That either will or won't be okay, but let's not wait until we're having a dust up to find out. Let's set that agenda. We have a shared interest. Let's be open and let's work together. So those are the two paths. Each is nuanced. Both are critical.
Brilliant. Thanks, Wayne. I hope that answers your question, Mark. Just got one more question. How do I know if someone is good at sales forecasting before I hire them?
Yes. Okay, so hiring, recruiting, I'm going to say, even after many years' experience, and I discuss this a lot with John, recruiting good salespeople is difficult. You need a good partner. You need a clear idea of what good looks like. And yes, I do think forecasting should be a specific part of that process. So first of all, I think when you're hiring a salesperson, you should be mindful of the environment they're already working in and how that relates to the environment you have and the environment that you want to create. From a forecasting point of view, it's worth understanding that. What's the routine? What are they expected to do? I personally am comfortable asking what somebody's own view is of forecasting. What's their philosophy? How do they go about it? You know, we can paraphrase this question in whatever's right for your business, your style, your brand. But understanding someone's view of forecasting, giving them the space to talk about the subject, I think can be quite enlightening. And I think also, I mentioned earlier in the call, I referenced job spec. I would encourage that if you do think that it is a priority and that it is important, why wouldn't it be a bullet on the job spec? Why wouldn't we provoke? It's very tempting to say, we want you to look and sound like this, and we want you to deliver this. That leaves a huge gap in understanding what does that person bring, what do they add to the environment, and their approach to forecasting, I think, is illuminating. So why wouldn't we have it as a bullet? So there's a couple of ideas in there. It's not a binary subject. We are, of course, talking about people. I think that those couple of ideas will open up a conversation from which you can learn an awful lot about how an individual thinks about their own accountability and their own ways of thinking about individual and team success. John, does that answer the question?
Yes, thanks for that, Wayne. I think that answers the question. I'd like to thank everyone who has contributed into the chat today, but I appreciate that time is running away with us a little bit, so I'm gonna end it there. But if you do have any follow-up questions, then please do message Wayne directly. He'll be able to answer them directly for you. I'm going to send a copy of this out to everyone who's joined us today, and you'll also find it on our company LinkedIn page and also on the website. But for now, thank you very much indeed for your time, Wayne. Very informative session, and I look forward to the next presentation. Thanks again.